Greetings, this is Jazz for Jazz Reviews with none other than the next Total War strategy game. Published by Sega, developed by Creative Assembly. This title shall be the sequel to one of the best strategy games of all time. This is my review for the heavily anticipated Rome 2. With over 9 playable factions and locations spread from Britannia, Greece, to the sands of northern Africa, new players may find themselves lost during the period of 2072 BC. The Total War formula has always made for the most advanced strategy game over the years. Luckily, the game offers a handful of prologue tutorial chapters to introduce the game's mechanics, all soaked in some form of Roman narrative. There are always two sides to a Total War game, one being the physical battle element controlled entirely by the player, and the other dynamic would be the map and global strategy. As chief military dictator, the aim in any one campaign game is to conquer all other nations. A certain amount of sense and planning is needed to know which enemies are worth engaging and at what time. But armies will require coin. Hopes of all-out conquest are based on domestic responsibilities like tax management, technology research, and building your economy. Raising tax rates will reduce public happiness. Training new armies will add further strain on the people as the plebs starve for your ambitions of expanding your empire. So one has to balance out these factors and be prepared for any rebellions that may occur should the people suffer. So to the battlefield. Rome uses the same styled engine as that of Shogun 2. Those new to Total War games will be blown away by the number of factors affecting a battle. Naturally, spears, for example, should always beat cavalry. But things like hills, flanking positions, and morale need to be taken into account at all times. As a Shogun player, I felt there was a simple brilliance to its strategy. In Rome 2, I really don't feel at home in any battle. Things seem a lot more chaotic, especially now that troops can fight it out at both sea and land at the same time. Siege battles are massive, and placement is everything. Although ranged units seem to do very little now against those massive shields in Rome 2. The narrow streets of cities play havoc with your formations, and battles quickly become a lot more individualized than that of Shogun 2. Cavalry demands even more care, and would quickly become swamped should you engage any good unit head-on. New features include true line of sight. The brow of a hill, for example, keeps your units hidden from an enemy's view. The presentation and animations of troops look all the more impressive, and the new cinematic camera allows for some pretty badass third-person views. Of course, you would never play like this. That would be idiotic. But this time around, for some reason, developers have decided to implement multiple arcade-style capture points in order to obtain victory. Why? Why did they do this? Enemy AI, as well as your own soldiers, can be complete morons. Shogun 2 played a lot smoother with a lot less problems. This capture point system encourages more cat-and-mouse type battles, with arguably more reasons to tactically spread out your troops. Yet what this really does is provide for some really cheap wins in single player, as it's always easy to lure the enemy away from these points and have one archer unit running around taking all these points. Movement paths are also seriously flawed at this time. You'll find you constantly have to babysit your troops, and especially in naval battles where your ships just freeze up and stop rowing. But in reality, even in its current state, the strategy to Rome 2 is still jaw-droppingly amazing. And let's pull you back into the less exciting but essential campaign map of the game. As your faction encounters new nations, diplomacy can play an important tool in the growth of your empire. Trade agreements can be made, non-aggression pacts and alliances forged to prevent invasion. Luckily, Creative Assembly have actually embedded an action which can ask an ally to attack any given area should they feel so inclined. So allies are now able to join your forces on the battlefield to better your chances of victory. The intelligence of other nations does seem to have improved. A nation's disposition and opinion of your leader may become affected should you form treaties with their enemies, or carelessly wander into their lands without permission, for instance. It's impossible to know the entire system in play here, as there's so many variables, and I like that. It's the tedious politics and logistics in the game which may deter some buyers. Constructing military buildings for new units, as well as training them and moving them about the world, takes time. Added to that is the infuriating waiting time for the enemy AI to make their moves, which is longer on more low NPCs. There is also a larger emphasis on the virtues and upgrades of your generals and agents. Again, this requires a few more clicks every time they rank up to ensure they are fighting to the best of their potential. Troop variation at first look looks quite impressive, overwhelming, but when I dug down to it I found most troops have almost identical stats, some units with armor, some without, and compared with Rome, some factions seem a little shafted. I understand that some troops exist for purposes of historical accuracy, but units in Shogun 2, for example, were a lot more interesting, and all played differently. As a massive Total War fan, I know how time-consuming a Total War campaign can be. This time around, developers have promised a degree of streamlining in this side of the game. The only real streamlining is the bundling of regions into provinces, which reduces some micromanagement, but it's not enough. A few small changes include automatic garrison building in your settlements, as well as the fact that armies will always need a general now in order to move around the map. In addition, your generals can now choose to fortify their position, as well as block certain bottlenecks of the map to automatically engage enemy troops. Rome now integrates a gravitas and ambition system, which will ultimately lead to a factional rebellion as generals gain more and more influence in Rome. With this, you'll be expected to make some political decisions from time to time, yet I still feel the entire system is pretty shallow and had a lot more potential in the full scope of things. And the game will now cap how many units can be built until you conquer enough regions, which, whilst useful for Total War beginners, it completely curbs your freedom of power.
Really optimize the performance in terms of being able to deal with
with a budget that was claimed to be 40% bigger than Shogun 2. This game is buggy as hell.
We also want to make sure that, you know, the game's playable on lower end machines too, so
it's unoptimized and practically cannot be run on low end machines. There seems to have been no comprehensive testing cycle and no outside independent playtesting by professionals. Hell, a demo or beta would have solved many of the issues that now need to be patched. The Siege of Carthage doesn't look half as impressive as the Creative Assembly's demo. The full city with ships in play I found was only available in one of 4 historical battles. But my biggest disappointment lies with the multiplayer. I invested hundreds of hours into Shogun 2's online component, but Assembly have removed the competitive leveling system of Avatar Conquest. With no ranking system and no personalized troop building or the unlocking of new units, there really isn't any multiplayer value now. The game is beautiful, and there's no question about it. Its ambitions are huge, and it almost pulled it off for me. In a month or two, perhaps Rome will be a different game, but a Total War game could always be worth your money. With a game so advanced and mentally demanding, and with potentially hundreds of hours to offer, any Total War fan could find a reason to buy this title. Yet, a part of me thinks, why should the consumer purchase an unfinished product? Assembly have promised subsequent patches to address the game's many issues, so perhaps customers should wait until the January sales and pick it up then. I issue Total War Rome 2 an 8 out of 10, which is an amazing score considering. This has been Jazz for Jazz Reviews. For more video reviews, visit the channel and subscribe. Next review, Grand Theft Auto 5. But until then, I'll see you in the comments. Thanks for watching.